The neighbor from hell is trying to force me out. It started with a complaint about my lawn, but it ended with me sitting in a police station, explaining how my neighbor was systematically trying to destroy my life. I learned pretty fast this wasn't some simple dispute, it was a calculated campaign to force me out of my own home. For years, I'd saved every penny, dreaming of having a place that was truly mine. A small yard for a future dog, a kitchen to cook for friends, a front door that I could lock and feel completely safe behind. In my third year of owning my home, that feeling was shattered not by a stranger but by the man living right next door. The man I now know was running a campaign of misery with one goal: to get my house. For the first 2 years, living in my small blue house on a quiet suburban street was everything I'd hoped it would be. It felt like a community. We'd all wave when we got our mail, chat over the fence while gardening. My next-door neighbor, a guy I'll call Mark, was a retired widower who'd lived in his house for over 30 years. He seemed pleasant enough at first. A little reserved, maybe a bit obsessive about his prize-winning roses, but harmless. We had a friendly, if distant, relationship. We'd swap holiday cards and make small talk about the weather. I just thought he was a quiet, older guy living out his days in peace. I was so wrong. The peace was broken on a Saturday afternoon in early spring. I was mowing my lawn, a chore I actually found kind of meditative. As I was finishing up, Mark showed up at the low wooden fence between our properties. "You missed a spot," he said, his voice totally flat. He pointed a bony finger at a tiny patch of slightly longer grass by my driveway. I laughed, thinking he had to be joking. I'll get it next time, Mark. Good enough for government work, right?" He didn't laugh. His small, dark eyes were locked on that patch of grass with this weird intensity. "Some of us take pride in how the neighborhood looks," he said. "When your property looks sloppy, it reflects on everyone." I was floored. It was such a tiny thing, but he said it with the seriousness of a heart attack. Still, I wanted to be a good neighbor. I apologized, fired up the mower again, and went over the tiny patch until it was perfect. I figured that was the end of it. In reality, it was the first shot in a war I didn't even know I was in. That one bizarre complaint was the first red flag. It was the first time Mark showed me his version of the world was fundamentally different from mine, and that my little corner of it was now under his microscope. A few weeks later, things got worse. The complaints started coming in writing. The first was a neatly typed note, slipped into my mailbox, about the excessive noise from my house. I was living alone at the time and worked a normal 9 to 5. My evenings were me making dinner, watching some TV at a totally reasonable volume, and reading. The idea that I was a noise problem was laughable. The note read, "Your television is audible in my living room every evening. Please be considerate of your neighbors who value a tranquil environment." I was baffled. I went over to his house that evening with the note, ready to clear up this silly misunderstanding. "Mark," I said when he opened the door, "I got your note. I'm really sorry if my TV is bothering you, but I promise I keep it super low. Maybe your hearing is just more sensitive?" He just stared at me, his face a total blank. "I can hear it," he repeated. "It's a constant disruption." To keep the peace, I started using headphones to watch TV. It felt insane being chained to a cord in my own living room, but I wanted peace more than I wanted convenience. It didn't work. A week later, another note. This time about my footsteps. "Your heavy-footed walking can be heard and felt through the walls," it said. "It is particularly disruptive in the late hours." My house is a single-story home. We don't share any walls. Our houses are separated by about 15 feet of lawn. It was physically impossible for him to hear my footsteps. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about noise. This was about something else entirely. The noise complaints became a regular thing, each one more ridiculous than the one before. He complained about the sound of my dishwasher. He complained about me slamming my kitchen cabinets. He complained about the sound of me talking on the phone in my own home office. Every complaint was a formal, typed letter. It was obvious he was building a paper trail. But for what? Then he escalated. He started fighting noise with noise. It started small. If I had a friend over and he heard us laughing in the backyard in the middle of the afternoon, his lawnmower would suddenly roar to life right next to the fence, drowning us out. If I played quiet music on a Saturday, he'd crank up a talk radio station on a speaker pointed right at my house. The worst part was at night. He seemed to have a sixth sense for when I was trying to sleep. On random weeknights, around 2 or 3 in the morning, a loud, banging noise would start in his garage. It would go on for exactly 10 minutes, just long enough to jolt me awake and get my heart racing, and then stop. It was psychological warfare. It was random, unpredictable, and designed to make me feel completely on edge in my own bedroom. Sleep became a luxury. The sanctuary of my home was being taken apart, piece by piece, and the silence I used to love was now just a tense wait for the next attack. Soon, the harassment campaign moved beyond noise and into straight-up personal intimidation. My property, the little piece of land I was so proud of, became his new battlefield. It started with my trash cans. On pickup day, I'd wheel my bins to the curb. After the truck came, I'd find my empty bins kicked over in the middle of my driveway, or sometimes even tossed into my flower beds. The first few times, I figured it was the wind or careless city workers. But then I realized it was only ever my bins. The whole street's bins would be standing upright except for mine. A few weeks later, it got worse. I came out one morning and saw he had meticulously lined up a row of dead branches and leaves just on my side of the property line, making this ugly, dirty barrier. It was a clear message: this is my territory and you're not welcome. When I went out to clean it up, he was watching from his window with a little smirk on his face. The verbal clashes got more frequent and way more hostile. He'd catch me as I was getting out of my car after work. He'd just stand on his porch and stare at me with this creepy, predatory gaze. If I tried to ignore him and go inside, he'd yell things. Not direct threats, but nasty, pointed comments. Big storm coming. Hope your roof is in good shape. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. Or, you should really get better locks. This neighborhood isn't as safe as it used to be. His words were always loaded with this sinister double meaning, designed to make me feel scared and vulnerable. The most terrifying incident happened one evening when I had friends over for a barbecue. We were in the backyard laughing and talking. Suddenly, Mark was at the fence. This time he wasn't just standing there, he was holding a pair of huge garden shears, and he was just rhythmically snipping them open and shut. Snip, snip, snip. He didn't say a word. He just stared at us, his eyes cold and empty, the sound of the shears cutting right through our conversation. My friends went dead silent. The vibe went from happy to horrifying in a split second. "What's his deal?" one of my friends whispered. I didn't have an answer. I tried to play it cool and suggested we all head inside. But I can still see it burned into my memory, the sun glinting off those steel blades, the relentless, menacing sound, and his hateful stare. That night, for the first time, I felt real fear. This wasn't just some difficult neighbor. This was a man who was actively trying to terrorize me. He was enjoying it. And I had no clue how far he was willing to go. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning. I walked outside to go to work and saw my car had been vandalized. A long, deep scratch ran the entire length of the driver's side, from headlight to taillight. This wasn't random. It was a precise, deliberate line, carved into the paint with pure malice. There was no note. There didn't need to be one. I knew who did it. I just stood there, staring at the damage, and something inside me snapped. The frustration, the anxiety, the fear, it all boiled over into a cold, hard decision. I was done being a victim. Done trying to appease him. Done hoping he would just stop. Standing in my driveway, looking at the scar on my car, I finally got it. This was a calculated campaign to make my life so miserable that I'd be forced to sell my house. The thought was terrifying, but it was also clarifying. My home was under siege and I had to fight back. But I knew screaming at him was pointless. That's what he wanted. He'd just twist it and use it against me. I had to be smarter. I had to be more methodical. That day I took my first sick day from work in years. I didn't go to a doctor. I went to an electronics store. I bought 3 high-definition security cameras. One for the front of the house to watch my driveway and porch. One for the back, covering my yard and the fence. And a small one, a dashcam for my car that would record even when it was parked. When I got home, I bought a thick journal and a pen. I sat at my kitchen table and started writing everything down. I documented every single incident I could remember, starting with that first complaint about the lawn. The 3 a.m. banging, the trash cans, the line of leaves, the garden shears, the verbal jabs, and now the scratch on my car. I described each one in painstaking detail. I made a promise to myself. From now on, every single act of harassment, no matter how small, would be recorded. I was building my case. Installing those cameras was one of the most empowering things I've ever done. As I mounted them on my house, I could feel Mark's eyes on me from his window. For the first time, I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I met his gaze. I let him see exactly what I was doing. I was sending him a message: I see you too. And from now on, so will everyone else. This was the turning point. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with a sense of purpose. I wasn't just putting up with his harassment anymore. I was actively gathering evidence against him. My home was no longer just a place to live. It was the headquarters for my own counter-operation. The fight for my home had officially begun. With the cameras up and my journal getting thicker every week, Mark's behavior changed. It didn't stop, but it got sneakier. He knew he was being watched. The obvious vandalism stopped. Instead, he did things the cameras couldn't easily see. He'd stand at the edge of his property just out of a clear shot and mutter threats. He started making false complaints to our homeowners association, accusing me of things that were easily disproven but a huge pain to deal with. He was testing my limits, trying to find a new way to get to me. And then he found one. He decided to weaponize the police. It happened on a Sunday night. I was at home just reading a book when I saw the flash of red and blue lights outside my window. My heart jumped into my throat. 2 police cars were at the curb and 2 officers were walking up my driveway. My mind was racing as I opened the door before they could even knock. "Good evening," the taller officer said. "We've received a report of a disturbance. A report of a man threatening a neighbor with a weapon." I was stunned into silence. A weapon. I looked past them and saw Mark on his porch, watching with a look of pure, vindictive triumph. "He did this. Officers, I have no idea what you're talking about," I stammered. "I've been inside all evening by myself. I don't even own a weapon." The second officer looked skeptical. "Sir, the complainant, your neighbor, stated that you came onto his property, brandished a large knife, and threatened him before going back inside. It was his most outrageous lie yet. A complete fabrication designed to get me arrested. This was his checkmate. My word against his." For a second, panic grabbed me. This was it. This was how he was going to win. And then I remembered. The cameras. The journal. The proof. A weird sense of calm washed over me. "Officers," I said, my voice suddenly steady, "what your complainant is alleging is a very serious and completely false accusation. And I can prove it." I invited them inside. They followed, looking at each other, not sure what to think. I led them to my home office, where my computer was hooked up to the security camera system. "My neighbor Mark has been harassing me for almost a year now," I explained as I pulled up the software. "It's escalated from noise complaints to vandalism." I started documenting everything. I opened my journal and showed them the pages and pages of dated, detailed entries. They glanced through it, their expressions changing from suspicion to interest. Then I turned to the computer screen. "This is the footage from my front camera," I said, hitting play. "It covers my front door, my porch, my entire driveway. As you can see by the timestamp, it's been recording all evening." I fast-forwarded through the footage. We saw the sun go down. We saw me get home from the grocery store earlier. We saw me take out the recycling. And then, for the next 3 hours leading up to their arrival, we saw nothing. My front door stayed shut. No one went in or out. There was no confrontation. There was no man with a knife. Just a quiet, empty porch. I switched to the back camera. Same story. An empty, peaceful backyard. The officers were silent, their eyes glued to the screen. The truth was right there in crystal clear 1080p. Mark's lie was completely exposed. "Now," I said, turning to them, "let me show you last week." I showed them the clip of Mark kicking over my trash cans. I showed them a clip of him shouting at me from his porch. I showed them clip after clip of his relentless, petty torment. By the time I was done, the whole dynamic in the room had shifted. I wasn't a suspect anymore. I was a victim with a mountain of proof. The taller officer looked at his partner, then back at me. "Sir," he said, his voice now grim and professional, "thank you for being so thorough. It seems we need to have another conversation with your neighbor." They walked out of my house and straight across the lawn to Mark's porch. I watched through the window as they confronted him. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I saw Mark's face fall. The triumphant look curdled into shock, then fear. He started waving his arms, pointing at my house, his lies crumbling around him. The officers weren't buying it. After about 10 minutes, they finished taking their notes. One of them told Mark in a very firm voice that filing a false police report is a serious criminal offense, and that based on my evidence, a report would be filed against him. The resolution wasn't instantaneous, but that night was the beginning of the end. Mark was eventually charged with filing a false police report. My detailed journal and camera footage became the foundation for a civil harassment restraining order, which a lawyer helped me get. The court order said he couldn't contact me, come within a certain distance of my property, or harass me in any way. The legal battle and the risk of real penalties finally seemed to break him. A few months later, a for sale sign went up on his lawn. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in the neighborhood. The house sold and a young family moved in. I never saw Mark again after the final court date. The new neighbors have 2 kids and a golden retriever that sometimes sticks its nose under the fence, and I don't mind one bit. The silence that has returned to my home is different now. It's not a tense, anxious silence where I'm waiting for the next attack. It's a deep, peaceful quiet. The kind of quiet I dreamed of when I first bought the house. Looking back, the whole thing was a nightmare. It was a violation of the one place on earth I was supposed to feel safe. But it also taught me something important. When you're facing someone like this, you can't fight fire with fire. You have to fight it with cold, hard facts. Documentation, evidence, and a calm, methodical approach are your best weapons. My cameras and my journal saved me. They gave me my power back. They gave me my home back. This was one of the most stressful times of my life, and it's a situation way too many people find themselves in. If you've ever had to deal with a neighbor from hell, share your story in the comments. What did you do? What worked and what didn't? Your experience could help someone else going through the same thing right now. And if you found this story compelling, please give it a like and subscribe for more. Sometimes, the most unbelievable stories are the ones happening right next door.